Okay team, welcome back to my channel. If you don't know me already, my name is Kat, and for the last year and a half now. For the last year and a half, I have been traveling around the world, living in different places. I'm currently based in New Zealand and recently took my second trip to New York. And today I am going to give you 10 tips on how to do New York City on a budget. Quick little disclaimer before we start. If you are flying to New York from anywhere in the UK, it is never going to be cheap. The only thing you can do is book as far in advance as possible to keep the price down. The other little secret I will let you into is if you check the flights from a European city like Barcelona, Paris, they're often cheaper, a lot cheaper, like nearly half the price cheaper, to fly from Europe to JFK. If you're willing to do what it takes, you could always book a little flight over into Europe before you then have your official flight to New York. I have done this. I would recommend it if you're really on a budget because it does save you hundreds of pounds. Make sure you do consider the cost of the flight over to Europe though, and also your accommodation and expenses whilst you'll be in the European city. Okay, for this first little section, we are talking about food. Everybody talks about how expensive the food is in New York. If you're going to a restaurant, you're expected to tip on top of the normal price. Sometimes they don't even show the tax added into the price. It's a nightmare. So here are a few top tips on eating on a budget in New York. Number one, breakfast. Pastries. Go and grab a pastry for your breakfast. There are hundreds of thousands of millions of lovely bakeries in New York. Wherever you are staying, you will for sure find a good bakery nearby that does delicious pastries, and usually the pastries are gigantic. They are plenty to get you going in the morning, and they're cheap, like under $5. Number two, lunchtime. For lunch, grab yourself a bagel. Bagels are an absolute classic New York staple, and while you can find the odd overpriced tourist bagel trap, most bagel shops, especially, they tend to look a little bit run down, the proper New Yorkie ones. They'll do your bagel for less than $8, I'm gonna say. Certainly under 10. And of course, as the Americans like to make everything extra big, extra special, extra mad, the bagels are gigantic. They're full to the brim with fillings, and they will definitely do you a very good lunch. Number three, it's dinner time. We are gonna have pizza slices for dinner. I ate so much pizza when I was in New York. It's horrendous, but it's just so good, and it's just so easy, and it's just so cheap. There is the legend of the $1 slice. Now, there are still pizza shops that do a slice for $1, but they are a little bit more few and far between than they used to be. But you can certainly find cheese slices for $3 in most places. And when I say slices, they are literally this big. Bigger than your head slices. So that's breakfast, lunch and dinner sorted on a budget, super cheap. You're welcome. This brings me on to point number 4, which is eat on the go. All three of the foods I've just mentioned, pastries, bagels and pizza slices, you can take away. If you take away from a restaurant, you do not need to tip. Most nice places will not ask you for a tip if you're taking away, but there are some tourist traps, let me tell you. A lot of cafes and takeaways and restaurants will now have this iPad screen, which is like in front of the till facing the customer. And after you've paid, a little screen comes up asking how much you want to tip. Well, let me tell you, if you're taking it away and you're a New Yorker, they are never going to put that screen in front of you. But if they know, if they get a little whiff that you're a tourist, they're going to be asking for a tip, and it's panicky, and the 3 options on the screen is like 15%, 20%, 25%. Well, that's a lot of money. And what are they doing? Handing it to you from a cabinet? Like, come on. Do not get taken in by this tipping business if you are getting a takeaway. If you are leaving that place and going somewhere else to eat your food, don't pay extra for it. Sorry, just interrupting very quickly to say that if you are still watching this video and you haven't yet done so, now would be a fantastic time to click the thumbs up button. Thanks. Okay. Number 5. If you haven't heard of the app called Too Good To Go. Where have you been? This is not an ad, I just love the app. I used to use it a lot when I lived in Brighton. They don't have it here in New Zealand, which is sad, but it's one of the greatest inventions in the world. I actually did a video a few years ago on Too Good To Go in Brighton, which I will link in the description so you can go and watch it below if you're intrigued to find out more. But essentially it helps save restaurants and cafes from throwing away so much food, and you can then go and buy it for much cheaper. You just don't get to choose what you get, which is a happy surprise. Next up, number 6 is take a reusable water bottle with you, carry it everywhere and drink lots of water. I always find that on trips or going out for meals, whatever it is, the drinks are so expensive. That's where they get you, that's where they catch you out. If you buy a pastry for breakfast, quite often you're going to pay more for your coffee to go with that pastry, which in my head is like mental. I just think food is worth so much more than liquid. There are not tons and tons of places you can refill your water bottle, but it's certainly going to get you through that first few hours of the day at least. And there are refill points, and some restaurants and cafes will refill your bottles for you, some won't, but you know, take advantage of it when and where you can. Next up, number 7 is use the subway and or / walk. The first time I went to New York, I recorded my steps, my daily steps, and I was doing somewhere in between 25 and 30,000 steps a day. It's mental how much ground you can cover in New York. Plan days around certain areas of New York that you want to go to so that you don't have to pay too much for your travel from place to place to place to place. And secondly, if you do need to travel a bit further and you don't want to walk or your legs are just tired, get the subway. Do not get a taxi. They are so expensive. Little side tip, you can actually get a weekly pass if you were going to be in New York for a week or more. Do the maths. It's usually cheaper to buy a whole week's pass for the subway than to just use the pay-as-you-go system. So have a look at that if you are going for more than a week. Number 8. Go with somebody. It's great if you want to solo travel in New York, but let me tell you, if you want to do it on a budget, the best thing to do is go with somebody. Then you can book a room, you can split the cost between the two of you, whether that's in an Airbnb or a hostel or whatever it is. If you're splitting a room between two, you're literally halving the cost of your accommodation, which will be hundreds of pounds. Alright, number 9. If you want to go and see a Broadway show, which in my opinion is an absolute must do if you're going to New York, as long as you're not too fussy about exactly which show you want to see, go and get your tickets at the TKTS booth in Times Square. There's also another TKTS booth somewhere else in New York, but I can't remember where. But there's a massive one in Times Square, and if you go on the day that you want to see the show, get there early-ish, and you will have a pick of a bunch of shows. A bunch? It's a lot. You will get the pick of a bunch of shows, and they will be a much cheaper price than if you bought them than if you bought the tickets in advance. And finally, number 10. This is my favorite, and I think the most unexpected thing about New York is there is so much to do that is completely free. Even just walking around the city and taking it all in is such an amazing part of being in New York. Walking through the parks, obviously Central Park, but also Washington Square Park, Bryant's Park is lovely. You can walk the Brooklyn Bridge, you can see the Statue of Liberty. There are so many free things to do, and in fact, my next video, I'm going to talk about all of the best free and cheap things to do in New York. So, if you ain't subscribed yet, if you are not already subscribed to my channel, make sure you subscribe and click that bell button to get notified when I upload that video, because let me tell you, there is some good info coming your way. Thank you so much for watching my video this week. If you are looking for more New York content, go ahead and click one of these videos here. I will see you next week with another video, and goodbye!